Hello there, good people. It is Wednesday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and that means it is time yet again for another live stream. Let me see if we're live yet. How are we doing out there? I see a few people in the audience. Let me get my microphone muted here. Okay, there it is. Boy, how's everybody doing today? Worcestershire Project talking about his recent experience with pigs. Yeah. You can put rings in the nose to help stop them from rooting everything up. That helps a little bit. But yeah, they are very, very destructive. Switch over here. Pigs, very destructive. If I was going to be using pigs, I'd probably put them on early, get the roots torn up, and then get rid of them. And some animals seem to be more trouble than they're worth. Okay, so you're saying Corey wants to put in swales and line them with fruit trees and berry bushes. That's a good plan. That's a very good plan because you're going to need water for everything else. And well, let me switch over to that shared view. We've got this picture up here with the sheep on the little slope, and we've got the older trees up here at the top of the hill. We've got the young ones down here. They're protected with cages to stop the browsers from damaging the trunks. And I'm not sure whether this line right here is a path or a swale with some water in it. It should be a swale to hold the water. And if you have that, you've got the water close by to the animals. So you have this cow up here and that, I think that's a miniature horse or a pony up there. And of course, the sheep can get down there and get the water. And if they're not far away from water to where they're going to be grazing, they can graze all up and down the entire length of the area you've got staked out for them to graze on. Putting animals out in the pasture and having their water at one or two spots in or around the pasture winds up with the animals concentrating their presence near where the water is most of the time, and the far ends of the pasture area wind up not getting grazed, or at least not getting grazed as much. More of the pressure will be close to the water. So if you have that swale running the length of where the animals are going to be grazing, it's always there, and they can feel free to roam back and forth, and they're never too far away from the water. Hi, Mary. Hi, everybody. Let me take a look and see who's in here. So today we got some new announcements. If you notice down there somewhere under the description box, we've got a new box called Join. We've actually gotten access to channel memberships now. Woohoo! Hey, Paul, how you doing? Paul has some sheep. I'm not sure how many sheep Paul has, but he's got a few. Channel memberships now available. We're just turning into a real proper YouTube channel now. So we let's just run through the membership introduction thing really quick, and then we'll get on the road with the rest of the program while we're waiting for everybody to show up. What is channel membership? I'm so glad you asked. Channel membership is another way for me to con you out of your hard-earned money. That's what it is. Channel memberships are a feature that allows you to use special custom emojis and badges in chat. The first tier, that's not all it does. The first tier is 99 cents a month, and you gain the ability to use live chat during live streams, where members only are allowed to use the chat feature. I haven't needed to do something like that yet. We haven't been overloaded with a whole bunch of people throwing out comments in chat as of yet. If the channel grows too much larger, eventually it'll get to the point where the average random people coming in and just dropping comments that have nothing at all to do with the topic may become a problem, and we may enable members only chat. That way only the people who are really serious about the subject matter will be using the chat. But we haven't come to that point yet. But that's what you would get at the very first tier. you don't see the membership option. That's interesting. Let me scroll down here. If you scroll down to the description box below the video, it should show up. Throw out some of the custom emojis that we have. We can get this thing to work. There we go. We only have a few custom emojis to start out with. Yeah, if you're using a cell phone, it might not show up. But there we have our little bee, a butterfly, a little garden gnome, and the happy gardener emoji. Those are the first ones that we've got. Of course, later on, okay, Paul's saying we had our first lamb Monday, then bought 3 more sheep yesterday, so we're now at 15 sheep. This is how it starts. This is how it starts with livestock. You get a couple. You go, we're just going to get a couple. Yep, that's how it always starts. Yeah, I've got my little garden gnome emoji. It's a garden gnome with a shovel. Let's see. That's what you get at the 99-cent level. At $1.99, you also pick up priority response from comments, which at the moment hasn't been a big deal either. I usually don't get so many that I don't have time to get around and respond to everybody. I usually get back in touch with people and respond to comments within about a day or so. But I could foresee eventually, the day's probably going to come that I'll be just maybe throwing a thumbs up where I love your comment and then moving on. But of course, people have questions. Sometimes questions require research. I may not happen to know the answer off the top of my head. So if I want to give you a good answer to your question, I might have to do some research. That's just kind of a way to compensate me for doing a few hours of research to come up with a 2-second answer. Mucking straw with a shovel, pointless, too matted. Is shavings more ideal? Well, you can use straw. Shavings would be nice, but you can still use straw. Just don't use the shovel. They make a special fork that has multiple small tines on it. It's very sturdy, specifically for mucking out stables and pens and moving bedding. Manure fork. Well, I think you're kind of on the right track there, Paul, because as we'll get to it here in a minute, sheep are a good choice. You've got milk that you can get from, you got meat you can get from, you can get wool off of them, and you can use a pitchfork too. It only has 4 or 5 tines as opposed to the composting fork or manure fork. A couple of my videos, you'll see me using that really short-handled green tined fork. That one's a manure fork. And it's really good for using to load up your soiled bedding with. And it's good for turning compost too, for that matter. Yeah. Let me see here. I was trying to tell you all about our membership deals. So $1.99 is more of the same. Priority response to comments, which sometime in the future is probably going to be hard for me to keep up with everything. So I'll pay more attention to the people that are paying me, obviously. The next higher level up from that is that $4.99. Oh, we have special titles for everything. There's the seed level, which is the basic 99-cent level. I've got 99-cent memberships, so a whole bunch of channels myself. It's kind of fun being able to use the emojis and some of the other stuff. At that level, at oak level, which is the 3rd tier, you get the extra footage, unedited footage, sometimes off-topic things that are just not exactly in the gardening area, but kind of things that I want to talk about. And I believe that's also the level where we have the ability to join members only live streams, where pretty much the entire live stream would be off topic. Things that Karen can't handle. Hello, Joe Serrana from Mexico, South Central Mexico. He's in the warm part. Hey, nice to see you here. Top level of membership, Jason cooks you breakfast. Well, no, actually, at the top level of membership, I put a special thanks to in the descriptor box for every video I put out with your channel link in there. And one member every video gets a card posted during the video with a link to their channel or to a video that they would like to have promoted. And also, you get a monthly discount coupon to our web store. So if you like buying perennial plants and trees and would like to get discounts, that those will come with the top tier membership as well. Anyway, we have spent plenty enough time talking about the dull, boring, blah blah blah, make Jason more money stuff. Let's get on to living with livestock, huh? So, as I've told you guys before, I grew up on a farm, or actually, it's what was left of the farm. It was if you live in the Tulsa area, you may be familiar with Hickey Creek Park, and Hickey Creek Park is the bulk of my grandfather's old farm. Grandma sold it off to the Tulsa County Parks Department to build the park out of. But we kept 10 acres in the family, and that was the 10 acres that had the 3 ponds, the water catchment system, irrigation system, and a few fields plus the house and the barn. 10 acres altogether. My mother and I and stepfather, my 2 older brothers, took up residence there in 76 or 77. I can't remember exactly which. I was kind of young at the time. And at that time, most of the fields had become overgrown. There was grass well over my head height. Of course, I was shorter back then, but it was pretty tall. We had everything fairly cleaned up and whipped into shape, and mended the fences by 79, which is when the first goats arrived. And much like Paul's having the experience of, the parents said, "We'll just have a few goats for milk and a few chickens for eggs." And that's how it always starts whenever you're getting livestock. We're just going to get a couple. Yeah, right. By 1985, Fine Fiddler Farm, which is what we were calling it at the time, had over 144 head of dairy goats, at least twice that many chickens, more racing pigeons than we could count. They're always coming and going anyway. Somewhere between 40 and 50 emperor pigeons, which are the kind that you actually butcher for roast pigeon, not that we ever did. Half a dozen turkeys, about a dozen geese, about 40 ducks of various pedigrees, including mallards, muscovies, the plain old white ones, and at least 8 purebred Chinese war dogs, the chows. We're trying to breed blues, at least stepfather was. Mean, vicious critters. We had 1 acre reserved for our annual vegetable garden, and 1.5 acres was generally kept in some kind of fodder for the goats. But as you can probably imagine, that wasn't going to be enough to feed that many goats. It was not a permaculture operation. We were constantly importing hay and feed and straw and operating at a loss. So eventually, all the livestock got sold off. We packed everything up and moved to a mountaintop in Taney County, Missouri. That was when I was, I think, 15. And that brings us to today. So I have a little bit of experience working on a maybe not necessarily a profitable, but definitely a highly populated farm with livestock. And I learned a few things. One of the first things I learned is taking care of livestock is a pain in the backside. And if this was a members only channel or a members only chat, I would be using a different word. A big pain in the backside. And whenever they die, you have to do something with the bodies. So, as you can imagine, I got a lot of experience using that shovel. Paul's having some homework being done on the PC. Okay. Cool. We're currently classified as permaculture entertainment. Hey, you know what? If you've got a 30-acre operation and you're running a permaculture operation on 30 acres and you have something that people might want to come out and look at to see what it looks at or see what it looks like, you can charge people at the gate to take tours of that. And yeah, absolutely, permaculture entertainment, sell the shirt, give them a jar of jelly, and send them on down the road, and they go, we got to see a real farm today. Hey, cool. It's another revenue stream at least. Hello, John. Will it grow? Nice to see you here today. We got the best life and Chris Sunleitner. Yeah, that's a lot of pigeon droppings. Pigeons are messy. Well, chickens are messy too, but pigeons are messy. Lee's Arkansas Bound is here listening. Cool. In the works. Hello, John Conrad. That's my cousin John. And of course, we got Sasspress Red here today as well. As a matter of fact, as we get into this, John read my show notes earlier on and gave me a couple of pointers because John is actually on a farm where they are raising beef cattle. And he was checking my math. Well, people do get that idea in their heads that they're going to enhance their self-sufficiency by raising some animals. And although the living space requirements for livestock can be met in small spaces, those animals require some additional resources. And those resources, well, they have to come from somewhere. And before I forget, I was refreshing my memory earlier today. This was a video that came out last year, right about this time, actually. I think it was around the 7th of February, from John Suskovich. And it was entitled 2.72 square feet of pasture per egg produced. And if you haven't seen that particular video, John Suskovich, Suscovich, Suskovich. If you haven't seen that video, it's worth a look at because he was looking at a pastured poultry operation where they claim that they're raising 5,000 hens per house with 108 square feet of space per hen, and it's pastured poultry. And he was kind of examining that claim, and there are parts, well, you can watch the video yourself. There are parts that were true, and then there are parts that they may be technically true, but are unrealistic. The chickens weren't getting all their food from the pasture. We'll put it that way. There was no way to make it happen. We'll get into that a little bit more here in a minute, but it is definitely worth taking a look at if you have the opportunity to go see that. Resources have to come from somewhere. My comment on that particular video regarded the amount of feed that those chickens required, since obviously they weren't getting it from just going out and being on pasture. They had the space, but they couldn't get to it. So they had to be fed. Supplemental feed, total of a quarter pound of feed a day. If you're feeding corn, that's the equivalent of, I think it was 473 point something or other, 0.3 maybe, square feet of space per bird per year needed to grow the grain to feed the bird. So if you were raising 5,000 chickens, you'd need something like another 70 some odd acres on top of the space that they needed to run around in. It's just crazy. But this is something that people don't think about when they go, well, we can put a few animals in this small space and we're increasing our self-sufficiency. No, you're not increasing your self-sufficiency. You're giving yourself another dependence upon another entirely different supply chain. And where are you going to get all the food that you need? Start out with grass. Assuming you've got a pasture full of good grass for fodder, maybe an average height of about a foot or so, and you're expecting the animals to graze down to 2 inches. They're going to be eating about 10 inches worth of grass. On an acre, that's about 2,000 pounds worth of feed. So the formula here is height in inches multiplied by 200 pounds per acre. And that gives you the poundage of the feed that you would get off of pasture land if you're grazing your animals. And you can scale that down or up depending upon what you need for the amount of space you're working with and for the animals you're working with. But you have to take into account what your animals need to live on. So feed requirements for different animals is important. And this is where John corrected me a bit. I said a cow will eat about 25 pounds per day. That's a cow, not a steer that you're raising for slaughter. A steer is much, much bigger and will eat close to twice that amount. So an acre that's well planted and foraged will support one cow for about 80 days. If you're grazing in rotation, you might be able to get 160 days. Say like a 3-month on, 3-month off rotation. And of course, you bring the cow into the barn for the winter, or at least provide them with shelter for the winter and supplement with hay during that period of time. Of course, the hay requires more weight because it's dry weight to feed the cow. So you're going to have to come up with a way to provide that feed as well. I estimated one cow, not steer, one cow would need 1.5 acres for grazing space, and you're probably going to need another acre to grow and cut your hay for that 90-day period wherever they can't go out and graze. So that's 2.5 acres per cow. For a steer, as John pointed out, about 5 acres, maybe 4, depending upon what you've got to forage with. If you're down in Texas and you've got really good grassland, maybe a little bit less. But it all depends upon the kind of grass that you've got to work with. And I'll get to that too in a minute. Sheep, on the other hand, require less feed per animal, but a higher ratio of body weight to feed. I didn't put it in my show notes, but the amount that a cow eats is about 2% to 3% of their body weight on a daily basis. Sheep consume about 4% of their body weight every day, but they weigh a lot less. Your adult ewe is going to be somewhere around 150 pounds, more or less, depending upon your breed. Rams, on the other hand, get heavy. You can have a 250-pound ram pretty easily if it's one of the larger breeds. So expect, on the average, maybe 6 pounds a day. But with the same 3-month rotation, you can get close to 3 adult sheep, 2.7, give or take. I don't know how you get 0.7 sheep. Maybe it's a lamb. But fairly close to 3 sheep maintained per acre, plus the winter feed. So if you add in that extra space that you need to grow the hay, about 1/2 acre per sheep if you've got decent quality forage for them to graze on. Goats have lighter frames, usually. On the average, they can get by on about 1/3 of an acre per goat, presuming that one's raising any kind of goat that's worth having. Nubians, if you've got flat land, warm climates, Saanans are grown on either flat land or light hills. A little bit lighter, but still good milkers are Toggenburgs, great for hilly land. I personally love Toggenburgs. If someone's trying to give you a pygmy goat, a Nigerian dwarf goat, a boar, or a Kiko goat, they are not your friend, and turning the dogs loose on them is entirely appropriate because they're lousy for dairy. I mean, really lousy for dairy. The milk's no good. I mean, you can drink it, but you don't really want to. You can get meat off of them, but hey, guess what? You can get meat off of a Nubian Saanen or Toggenburg too. You just have the option of having decent milk as opposed to, I don't want to drink that. Pigs, hate to mention them, but lots of people like to raise pigs. Not my specialty at all. They need about 6 pounds of feed per day. Also, amazingly enough, they can get by on pasture grass just like a sheep can, although pigs can eat and will eat just about everything. 1/2 acre per pig is just about right. But if you want to put on the extra butcher weight, you might want to get your hands on some extra fodder, maybe add an extra 1/6 of an acre per pig being raised. And that should take about 6 months to get from a suckling pig to about 240 to 250 pounds on the average. And there's some special things that you can plant to help boost those numbers as well. All right, let me back up to comments here and see what's going on. I didn't mention rabbits. I hate rabbits. I mean, they're nice and all, but I never did develop a taste for them. And you can't milk them. The fur is nice, though. The fur is very nice. Let's see what we've got. Indoor colony style rabbits. Yay. So Wickershire Project says, the Wickershire Project is saying, goal, infrastructure repairs, tiny home. Don't make it too tiny. You'll need to have space for your pantry. You need to have space for your tools, your everything. I don't know about this tiny house thing, because where are you going to put all your stuff? Roads need gravel, definitely. Parking lots need gravel. Yeah. Okay, cool. So you're already thinking about having the space for people to come in and park their cars. Um, Whenever you're putting that together, also think about having enough room to bring a big rig in. Have enough room for a big truck to come in and turn all the way around, because you never know. You might need it. You might need the space at one point or another. Swales, fruit trees, more raised beds, smokehouse. Oh, and a micro meadery. I want to come visit. All right. Yeah, if you've got 5,000 chickens, you need a lot of feed over winter. Well, that's the thing. If Paul, if you watch that video that John Seskovich did, you could tell from he looked at it from overhead using Google Maps, and you could tell from looking at it that most of the birds were not that far away from the house where they were being kept. I mean, they're really close to the house. They weren't wandering out and filling that entire 15-acre space that they were on. So the claim that they're pastured, okay, yeah, they have access, but in reality, no, they're not getting their feed from the pasture. They had to be supplemented with grain throughout the year. Which, I mean, technically they're pastured, but in reality, no. And Mary is saying Bert loves all the bugs we get. Ernie loves all the rodents. Well, I haven't. She's calling the big outdoor cat Ernie. They call him Sergeant. Sergeant hasn't done a really good job at going after groundhogs yet, but or rats. But he does eat a mole every now and then. Hmm. Oh, let me see here. Should be done by the end of the week. Ha ha ha. Well, those are all great problems to have. Projects to work on. Best way to dry corn without mold. Good question. Uh, some kind of kiln would be nice if you have a way that you can stack it up and blow warm, dry air through it. That would be good. Um, I know they used to build corn cribs so they keep them up off the ground, space for the air to move through, and a shelter to stop the rain from falling on it. But then you're still going to be at the mercy of ambient humidity. But if you're at a place where that time of year, whenever you're harvesting your corn and putting it up, is going to be dry enough, then that should be enough. Otherwise, you might consider building a basic kiln of some sort. Doesn't have to get incredibly hot, just enough to keep that warm air moving. Avoid bovine. Yeah, they take up a whole lot of space. A whole lot of space. And we did experiment on the farm with trying to raise some cattle. We had bottle calves and bucket calves. We tried both, and we got 10 head altogether, and we wound up losing 6 out of the 10. Um, I have not read "Kick the Hay Habit" by Jim Jerish yet, but I'll look into it, Paul. Um, we wound up losing most of our cattle, which is unfortunate because they had already started to get pretty big by the time they finally died. Just diseases. They were culls, which we didn't know about at the time. We just went, oh wow, we can get a good price here at the auction. Oh, lessons. That's a lot of digging with a spade. All right, Robert's heading off to eat some dinner, but he's in the background somewhere. Hi, Robert. Hello, Lori's World. That's why we stick with rabbits, ducks, and 4 doves. Well, yeah. If you're working with livestock, it's best to keep your numbers small. Like you imagine the number you want to have, and then cut that number in half, and then wait, and avoid the temptation to get more, because animals being animals and animals making more animals, you'll get more. The question is, will you get too many? And of course, that's what happened with Fine Fiddler Farm, because if we had 4 acres of pasture and 144 goats, but a good stocking number would have been 3 goats per acre, we should have had no more than 12 goats. We had 144 goats. We had 12 times the number of goats that we should have had on that piece of property. Which I had some information like this 5 years ago. Oh, well, think about it this way, Paul. You're going to have lots of good information. You're going to have lots of good information 5 years from now, especially specifically on sheep, because you're working with sheep right now. So you're getting the hands-on experience. So you can share some of those experiences with the class. I don't know. Pigs are just stinky. Stinky, stinky, stinky. And sassafras was red is right. Rabbits poop gold. You can use rabbit manure the day it comes out. You can put it out there and put it in the garden. Yeah. Speaking of tiny houses, our house is not tiny. It's small, and we could use more room. We really could use more room. Please come visit. Aren't you in England? Oh, you're in Virginia. Okay. Virginia is almost England. If I make it out that way. Let me see here. Friends have 60 acres and about 8 steers. So if we're doing 5 acres per steer and they've got 8, then they would probably want to have about 40 acres to let those 8 graze on and have enough to cut hay. They've got enough space for 8 steers. They've got enough space for them, so they're not doing bad there. Yeah, we'd like to have goats, but really no room here either. If you could put 3 goats on 1 acre, we've got a third of an acre to work with here, and about half of that is buildings. So we have really a sixth of an acre, which isn't enough for a goat. Not really. The reason I'm here is the free master class. Yeah. Me too. Me too. I'm learning stuff all the time, guys. Yeah. All right. So I've got some pictures up here. This one here is got a picture of what is that? I don't know my breeds too well. These are obviously chickens, right? Yeah, looks like a chicken to me. Well, chickens are a great way to get some protein, get eggs and meat and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And they need about a quarter pound of feed per day. If you were breaking that down into metric system, which I did, that's 113,398 milligrams per year. The reason I measured it in milligrams is because a conservative estimate of biomass in the organic horizon and the boundary between the organic and soil surface horizon is about 400 million insects. And that's according to the Smithsonian Institute. 400 million insects. That's a lot of bugs, people. If you're feeding bugs to your chickens. So let's see. Average insect weight of about 3 milligrams a piece. That makes the final mass per acre. And we're talking about, this is just that upper layer of soil from the top of the soil surface horizon where they can scratch down an inch or two up through that layer of organic duff on the surface. That's the area we're talking about. And this is, of course, the area where the chickens are mining for insects. At 3 milligrams each on the average, it's 1.2 million kilograms. or enough insects to provide 10,582 days of chicken feed on an acre. That'll keep 28 birds fat and sassy. 28 birds. So if we were talking about the amount of space you need to pasture raise your poultry, if you're planning on them getting most of their diet from insects, 28 birds per acre should be the stocking number you're looking at. They are going to eat some vegetation too. They're going to eat a lot of vegetation. But if you want to make sure that they're getting your bugs, somewhere between 28 maybe 30 in an acre, and scale up or down according to your needs. Obviously, if you have massive acreages, how are you going to be able to make sure those birds are actually there on the spot eating what they're supposed to be eating? It's a bit difficult to do, right? Square footage is about 1,500 square foot per bird. That's a forage rate of 4 square feet per bird per day. Now, the number that John came up with was 2.72 square foot per egg produced. That number is actually based upon the amount of carrying capacity that the soil has for the amount of manure that the bird's going to produce. Because whenever you're stocking at really high densities, that's a lot of chicken poop going down on the ground in a tight amount of space. And that spikes the nitrogen, and that leads to problems, particularly nitrogen runoff getting into waterways, causing algae blooms, oxygen deprivation into the water, dead zones, dead fish, dead everything down the line. So you don't want to have a high concentration of birds in one spot. There have been lawsuits that have been waged against poultry growers from people that live downriver or downstream from those grow operations because it's just too many birds in too small a space. So that 2.72 square foot is not the amount that they need to forage. That's the amount that you need to allow for them to poop on to get that one egg per day. And obviously, if you're looking at a stocking number that is focused on they're going to be eating the bugs and that's their primary feed, you're not going to run into a problem with too much nitrogen being laid down by too many birds in too small a space. All right. Incidentally, if you've got laying hens and you're building a chicken tractor, double the size of the enclosure per bird. Don't give them 4 foot of space. Give them 8, because your hens will get stressed if they're too crowded. So if you want them to keep on laying well, give them about twice that space, about 8 square feet, even 10 square feet for them to run around in, and that's plenty. They'll get all the food that they need. Just move that tractor every day or every other day. And we'll just rock right on. Let me move to another picture here. That one's a pond, because you couldn't tell from looking at it. Yeah, I think it was on the More Food on this Worcestershire project. I think it was on that video, More Food, Less Space. I was talking about the fertilizer runoff into the waterways and the dead zones that are created in the delta regions. It goes out for miles into the ocean. I mean, miles. And that's exactly the spot where we would want to set up ocean farms to capture phosphorus so we can bring it back to the land. But we can't grow anything there because the fertilizer runoff is too high. Nothing lives there except for the algae, and then they choke themselves. All right. Let me back up and have a look. John was saying, John Conrad's cousin John was saying 7.5 acres per steer. Not bad. Yeah, that's, if it's decent forage, they've got plenty of space. They'll be healthy and happy. And Paul is saying if you're going to take your livestock frequently, you can increase the stocking density. Yeah, exactly. I'll get into some rotation strategies here in a minute. You can't just leave them on the same spot and expect everything to be hunky-dory. They'll tend to concentrate closest to the water well, I started out talking about this. They'll concentrate closest to the water, closest to the shelter. You could leave them the entire space to roam around in, but they're not going to go too far away from those primary requirements they have: water, shelter, obviously food, but they'll just keep on coming back and forth and back and forth in a short range around those other things. They won't get the entire pasture unless you have a means of making sure that they move. Because animals are just like us. We like things easy and convenient, right? if I've got if I've got if I've got some steaks in the fridge, but the Pop Tarts are right there, yeah, it's a temptation to eat those Pop Tarts. I might have to spend a little extra time cooking a steak. If I have to go out and I have to butcher the steer, I'm probably going to eat the Pop Tarts. Cliffside Permaculture says, I am feeling overwhelmed with just my quail, if I'm honest, but it's really helped having that with fertility and food. Well, yeah, I personally don't like raising livestock. I've had plenty of experience with it. It's a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work. And it takes a lot of energy. They're great whenever you're young. It's not something you want to take on when you're already old. Metric system equals confused Americans. Yeah. I have to do conversions, but I like to get both numbers. That way I've got them both. Paul says, I love chickens. They're delicious, and so are the eggs. Yeah. Well, Murray's the big egg eater around the house. I eat some, but Joe is asking for favorite chicken breeds and says that he loves the French black copper Marins, the Turkins, and the Barred Plymouth Rocks. Barred Plymouth Rocks are pretty popular. My personal favorites are the, don't laugh, my personal favorites are the Bantams. I like them to be as close to the original wild Polynesian jungle fowl that they started out as. If I could get a Bantam that was a little bit larger, I would try that. So whenever we had them, I was trying to experiment with crossbreeding Bantams with a heavier breed, so I could get a larger chicken but still have that wild genetics that knows how to take care of itself. Our one rooster, Bert, he is a second generation freeborn chicken. His mother was hatched under a hen, and her mother and her father were hatched under a hen. Because obviously Bert's father was hatched under a hen as well. So he's about as wild as you can get and still be a quote domesticated chicken. Now there is always a new way into the coops, but you've got to build chicken coops like Fort Knox practically to keep things out, and then something will still find its way in. What's your take on Mark Baker's Mangalista hogs? I've never seen one. Well, okay, I can't say I've never seen one. I've never seen one and knew that was what I was looking at. I've seen some ugly looking pigs before, though. Let's see. Workshop Project says we have enough ticks and stink bugs to feed our birds and the other 9,000 people that live in the small towns birds too. Yeah, I mean, the bugs have a lot of biomass. I mean, a lot of biomass. And chickens, guinea fowls, they love to run around and eat bugs. They're great at it. The backyard where Bert runs around, one chicken, that entire backyard area, no grasshoppers at all. Front yard, he doesn't get out here that often, grasshoppers galore. So there you go. Well, in order to get hens, I need more space. That's the problem. Or I've got to import feed for them, which brings us back around to the entire, it's not permaculture. But I am working on a way of having feed for more chickens, and that's, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Leghorns and Rhode Island Reds. Yeah, bigger laying breeds, meat breeds. I've heard too, Melinda, that chefs want duck eggs. Let's see. Yeah, if you're gonna have birds running around and you're gonna be trying to grow mushrooms, then you need to protect the mushrooms from the birds, because the birds will eat the mushrooms. Yeah, I know I can fit a few chickens in there. Okay, as soon as I get out there and I fix the coop so that everything can't get in there, then I'll probably get a couple more chickens. I haven't given up on the idea yet. It's just I need to rework the chicken raising operation. All right. So what we've got up here is a pond or maybe a really long swale. It's hard to tell. Is that water? Does it keep on going around that way? Is this just a broad ditch? And somebody in the permaculture community is just going to slap me for calling a swale a ditch. But hey, it's a ditch, people. Get over it. It's a long, deep, water retaining ditch. But whether you're planning on raising livestock or not, water is going to be a necessity, unless, of course, you've got someplace where you've got regular and consistent rainfall, which is not many places out there. I mean, there are plenty of places that get plenty of rain. They've got rainforest up there in Oregon. We get 40 inches a year at least, but it's not all consistent at the same time. We have a few months where it dries up and there is no rain. So holding on to water, being able to provide water is important for just about everywhere out there. Being able to hold on to water is important. And of course, this presents the opportunity to do some aquaculture, which is raising fish. Um, there are several varieties that are acceptable for pond fish, depending upon where you're at. Um, if you're in some place where you can keep a water temperature of 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and what is that? 12 degrees Celsius, since I didn't put it in my show notes, but around 12 degrees Celsius, 13 degrees Celsius for people with a metric system. If you can keep that kind of water temperature for most days, 240 days out of the year, give or take, and have at least an area deep down that isn't going to get too incredibly cold during the winter, then tilapia make a great fish for farming. And I know there are some people out there that are, oh no, tilapia are horrible. I've tried them before. They were just, it was wretched. I didn't like it. Nasty tasting. Well, chances are, if you've had that experience, I'm sorry, but whoever was raising the fish skipped a very crucial stage of the fish farming operation, which is the purge. You take the fish, and for at least a week before you process them, you put them in a tank of clear water. No food. You don't feed them. You allow them to excrete all of their waste byproducts. And if you do that before they're processed, they come out tasting wonderful. Nice, firm flesh, flaky, not too fishy, good stuff. But if somebody didn't do that, then yeah, you'd wind up with a nasty tasting fish. All right. So where were we at? Tilapia. I mentioned this because of their dietary requirements. They are omnivores, which means they can eat just about anything, but they can live on a purely vegetarian diet. All right. Before I go any further, let me run up here and see what people are talking about, because I know I've got to have at least one person that's going to be talking bad mouthing tilapia. Just know it somewhere here. Where is it? As soon as I said tilapia, somebody was like, no, nope, what? No, nobody hates tilapia. Okay, that's interesting. Somebody on replay, somebody on replay, or what are you saying? Sassafras Red says grass carp flying fish are white fleshed and what? That's probably a typo. I mean, I have heard that the grass carp are good to eat. I've never tried one. I think they require a little bit of specialized cutting. Oh, like butter. Oh, well, that sounds nice. Yeah, most people only eat the store-bought tilapia, and sometimes the store-bought tilapia was not processed right. And if it wasn't processed right, then you could get a bad experience, which is just unfortunate. Because if it was processed properly, tilapia is freaking good. It's not quite as good as crappie, but it's still pretty good. All right, so some fish math real quick. The basic rule is 1 pound of food and 1 pound of air makes 1 pound of fish in 10 gallons of water. So that's from the aquaponics people. There are different opinions about those, but that's the general area. About 240 days to grow from fingerling size to a harvest weight of between 1 and 1.5 pounds. The fish are going to consume about 5% of their weight in food per day as they grow. So we'll take an example of, say, 20 fingerlings in a 300-gallon tank. But you can scale up to any size you want. Pond, pool, swale. Nice, long, deep swale, for example. You've already got it there. Do you want to use it for growing fish? You can. First 10 days, they're going to consume 1 ounce of food a day. That's going to be 10 ounces of food, right? Second 10 days, they'll consume 2 ounces, 20 ounces of food total, or 20 ounces for the second 10 days. That's 30 ounces over 20 days, so on and so forth. After 240 days, those 20 fish, presuming, of course, that you're keeping everything aerated, right? And you've got enough space for them, which you should. Those 20 fish will have eaten 187.5 pounds of food and have reached a weight of close to 1.5 pounds each, maybe some larger, maybe some smaller, and are ready to pull out and put on the dinner table. But the question is, would you like to feed those fish for free? Of course you would. So let me tell you about that stuff that's floating on the surface of the pond there. I'll move this mouse pointer over here. All this little green scummy looking stuff floating on the surface of this pond or swale or really broad ditch that we've got here. This is called duckweed. And duckweed, Lemna gibba, L-E-M, or Lemna gibba, L-E-M-N-A, gibba, G-I-B-B-A. There's another variety that's more tropical, that's actually a different genus. It's an aquatic perennial. It grows from zones 4 through 11 and on the USDA zone scale at a very fast rate. It can double every 24 hours under the right conditions, particularly if it's got lots of nitrogen. You might have lots of nitrogen available if it's growing in a space where there's, say, I don't know, fish that are manuring in the water. Increase the urea, which increases the nitrogen, makes the duckweed grow faster. Good stuff. All right, so remember our hypothetical 20 tilapia. Those are 24 ounces each, or 1.5 pounds. They'd have a combined mass of 480 ounces. They would consume 1.5 pounds of food per day. And that's exactly the amount produced by a 6x8 pond full of duckweed. If you had 6 feet wide, 8 foot long pond full of duckweed, that top layer from one side to the other is about 1.5 pounds. If it doubles every day, then it's just double the size of the pond to say 8 by 12. And now you've got a reservoir of duckweed doubling itself every day. You can continue to feed that hypothetical 20 tilapia in an area 8 by 12. And that's well over 300 gallons, even at only 1 foot deep. So if you got someplace where you can maintain 55-degree water for at least 240 days out of the year, then you can grow some tilapia. But if you don't worry, we've got you covered. I've got another fish growing system to tell you about. And actually, this is the one that Granddad used. Yeah, he probably it's gonna be a nice day for it too, John. All right. So let's see here. Sassafras Res got a fish market that sells them up there in Illinois. If you say catfish, Joe Serrano says, I think all the breed are great tasting. Yeah, I've eaten some catfish before. Store-bought Asian tilapia are gross in so many ways. Yeah, it depends upon where you get them. If they're not handling them right, whenever it's time to harvest them, you can get some nasty tasting fish. Robert says he's been eating chicken barbarian style and couldn't type. Yeah, wind up with sticky keyboards that way. Okay, and Paul says you had an aquaponic system in Arizona. We raised and ate tilapia. They are delicious. You know, Paul, the very first time I ever saw anybody raising tilapia, it was on an episode of Doomsday Preppers. I believe they were in Arizona, and they had a swimming pool in the backyard that they had converted into a tilapia pond, and we're raising duckweed to feed their tilapia. And I looked at that and thought, wow, that's just brilliant. Because you've got your garden going, you've got your fresh vegetables, and you've got fish that you just scoop right on out. Hey, I thought that was absolutely brilliant, and started looking into it and figuring out how to work it from there. Hello, Farmer Q Quintaris from Lioncrest Outdoors Gardening. Let's see. Belinda Schneider says down here in Florida, the law is very strict on fish raising. Yep. Well, they've had a lot of problems with invasive species in the Florida and the Everglades. People bring in things that don't really belong there, and they escape into the wild, and then they have some problems. So, Paul, maybe we should talk to you a bit about breeding tilapia, because I had some questions about that personally. I've read about it, but I haven't tried it yet. Caviar. All right. Let's see. Chris says, right now, freezer's full of bass that I caught last year. I really need to start going at those. Yeah, eat them. No. Well, Sassafras Spirit, talking about mud veins. If you're looking at the side, the flank of the fish, and you've got a little fat strip running right down that side, a lot of the time, that's where you're going to have your off flavors will be concentrated in that fat strip. And if you can cut that out as you're preparing your fillet, you can get rid of a lot of that off taste. This happens in not codfish. Pollock? Is it pollock that have that? Okay, I'll get back with you on the species. There a few of the cold water whitefish have that fat strip in them, and if you cut it out, it helps get rid of the off flavor. Of course, bass don't have that. Let's see. Get some lemon flavoring or grow some lemongrass. Yep. Having a pond with trees growing around it is number one goal. Yeah, got to have a pond. Spoonbill fish have that. Yeah, but mostly people catch the spoonbill for the caviar. And wish our project's saying snakeheads and bowfin. Yeah, don't confuse the two. Bowfin are native, and snakeheads are not. Also, the way the fins are on both ends are different. They look similar, but they're not the same. So, Quintaris, you want a third acre pond? Okay, it's a start. Have a big dream. Have three 1 acre ponds. There you go. All right. So the picture I've got up there is that's a bass, and well, clearly it's been caught out of some sort of a pond or a reservoir there. I didn't catch that bass, but somebody did. And if they're going to take that home and eat it, well, they'll get a couple bites out of it at least. But thing is, you don't have a bass pond so that you can have bass to eat. You can eat some bass, but actually, the system I'm about to describe is better suited for cooler climates. It's ideal for situations where you've got multiple water catchments that are going to overflow one into the other as they proceed down the slope. Kind of like that slope that was in the very top picture with the sheep that was up there. As you go down the slope, you have multiple swales, catchments, or ponds. And if you have them overflowing one into the other, this is a great system. And it's the system that Granddad established on the old farm. At your top pond, at the uppermost elevation, you want to stock nothing but minnows. And you want preferably herbivorous minnows, but a couple of the predator fish like mosquito eaters wouldn't be amiss. Just as long as you know that they're not going to reach a size where they're going to eat the adult minnows. And you set up your drainage overflow from that catchment to flow downslope. You want it wide like a funnel, wide here, like a funnel at its entrance, and maybe around 4 to 6 inches at the outflow. You want this set up to the point where you can periodically open up a large ball valve and flush waves of water with fish from that upper pond down to the lower one. It'll overflow and some might make their way down there that way, but periodically when it's time to feed the fish, open up the valve, siphon off some of the water. Some of the fish are going to go down into the lower pond, but the remainder of them are going to be up here in the upper pond where they'll continue to grow more minnows, more small fish. You can use things like goldfish in that. Probably don't want to make this to the point where it's going to overflow into a native waterway if you're going to be using goldfish. Unless, of course, they're already there, like in the White River, where the goldfish get to be 4 foot long. Anyway, second tier of your catchment should be stocked with things like sunfish and bluegills. So just like the first pond, this one has a funneled area overflow directly from where the bluegills are to your next pond down the slope. And the next pond down the slope is where your big fish will live, things like bass and crappie. The primary product of this system is to produce crappie, an endless supply of, well, nearly endless supply of crappie for the table. And crappie breed fast, and they'll breed out of control if you don't do something about them. And that's why you have bass in the pond. The bass aren't there for you to catch and have bass. The bass are actually there to control the numbers of crappie so that you don't have thousands of tiny little crappie. You want to have fairly decent size for the table crappie that you're catching. And the bass's job is to eat up a bunch of the little ones so that you can have a few big ones. And then if the bass get too big, you can harvest a bass or two as well. All right. Your irrigation lines coming out of your catchments should be laid out to have screens over the intakes so that your little fish don't go down into the irrigation lines. Otherwise, you'll be watering with fish, which might be a good way to increase fertility, but it's a poor use of the fish. The manure that they produce is going to be plenty to fertilize your plants. And I'm going to scroll down here to this cute little fellow and read some comments really quick. Hello, Gail, Southern Living. Yeah, and what Quintaris is saying here is, I want more, but I face the reality of what I can handle starting out. Maybe I can go bigger. My thought on this is, do you recall the story of the talents from the Bible? I know you've read the Bible a little bit. You take what you're given and show what you can accomplish with what you're given, and your tasks will be increased in proportion to the success of your labors. I think is a good way to look at it. Um, Work with small amounts first, and then if you can handle the small amounts, then you can take on greater responsibilities. Workshop product says we had Mercury Warning in Colorado. Wildlife and Fisheries recommended eating 1 to 2 fish per year. Really? Wow. Whew. That's scary. Well, sources for mercury. How about mercury oxide being used as an antifungal treatment? Because there's a reason why you don't want to use fungicides, because that stuff concentrates downstream and gets into our food supply, and we wind up ingesting it, and it hurts us. So rosy minnows survive in extreme temperatures. Cool. Minnow pops. um, I was mentioning something. I don't know. Maybe it was a blog post. I talked about the little tiny permaculture setup that my grandmother made next to the barn, and it had 3 pools. Oddly enough, it's like a little microcosm of the way that the irrigation system was set up. It had 3 pools, and they were stocked with goldfish. And for close to 20 years, nobody fed the fish other than occasional, hey, I think I'm going to feed the fish today. Let's give them some flakes. It wasn't the fish must be fed on a regular basis. It was only whenever somebody thought about it did they ever get fed. The water wasn't tended to. It was just, here's the fish. They're in these tubs. They're surviving on their own. When it freezes, they freeze solid, and for 20 years, those fish stayed alive in those tubs. Mary found the membership button. Yay! So if you're growing them for food, yeah, don't think of the goldfish as food. They can be food for something else, and they're going to produce a lot of ammonia. Ammonia is converted by soil bacterium into nitrogen. Nitrogen you can use. All right. I think I'm caught up with our chat here. So we got this little cute little fellow in the jungle here. It's probably a zoo in all actuality, but yeah, there he is, surrounded by all of this vegetation. Gorillas are like us in a lot of ways. The little one in the photo there is going to spend about a third of his life resting or sleeping, just like we do. He's going to spend a good amount of his time commuting back and forth from the places that he needs to go. Not nearly enough time socializing with his friends and his family. But there are several huge differences. I mean, just for one, and fire and cognitive ability. But actually, what I really want to talk to you about is the way he spends his time. Gorillas spend nearly half their time eating, and that's why, aside from no opposable thumbs, they haven't had the time to develop language, art, physics, chemistry, philosophy, space travel, or engage in warfare. They haven't built the bomb yet. And the reason is, just like cattle, sheep, and goats, there's a broad variety of edible vegetation on the menu for gorillas, but very little of it is nutritionally dense food. Humans like to eat nutritionally dense food. We'll go out of our way to find hazelnuts, for example, which are really good. The grill is just going to sit there and eat whatever is within arm's reach, like the cattle, the sheep, and the goats. So they consume volume. The practice of grazing livestock in and amongst trees is called silvopasture, and it's a good deal both for the trees and the livestock. The trees get the benefit of pruning from the browsing animals that are coming in underneath and getting those lower branches. They also get the benefit of fertilizer in the form of manure that the animals are leaving behind. The animals gain the benefit of a constant supply of shade, which is important in summer months. And if the landscape is managed to include long swales and water catchments, like what I would recommend that you do, they have a readily available water resource, which means they're never far away from a source of shelter, source of water. Their food is all right there, and they can get every bit of it. The use of perennial species to form the fodder for the grazing animals is also fitting very neatly into this overall plan. So we have clover for a ground cover layer, and then you'll have ryegrass, alfalfa, and perennial buckwheat for the rest of the forage. Chances are you're going to have some native grass there already, maybe some fescue, possibly bluegrass. Um, I believe John has some other recommendations for types of grass that you can plant into that sort of system. The idea is you want to introduce high nitrogen, high protein. So you have nutrient dense fodder. So although the animal might not select for itself a pasture with nutrient dense fodder, if we are helping out and building the structure, we can make sure that the nutrients are there for them. And that way they may not necessarily have to eat quite so much. All right. So although your livestock is probably not going to develop complex reasoning skills, they will definitely enjoy a life of lower stress, greater health, and have much better butcher weights if you arrange your fodder system to have nutrient dense fodder. And you can throw in things like Siberian pea shrubs to produce a not a grain, but a source of protein that can be stored over the winter better than hay. In the form of those pea pods that they produce. If you don't eat those pea pods yourself, you can save them for your animals. Um, Eastern cottonwood is also really good for a browsing fodder. The leaves are around 30% or more protein. And I've got a picture here of something else that you can wind up with if you're growing lots of flowering plants. For example, your alfalfa and your clover and buckwheat are all flowering ground cover type plants. So if you're having all of those flowers readily available, then you could have bees that are feeding on the nectar. So something you could possibly do. Not necessarily that you have to start raising honeybees, because your wild population of bees is going to do a pretty good job of pollinating all on their own. But this is just another way that you could capitalize on having that readily available resource. And this picture was taken in Germany, but this is kind of interesting. This plant here is a Plantago Minoris. It's a narrow leaf plantain. This is one of the plants that was not indigenous to North America, but you can find it all over the place here now. It sort of migrated with the Europeans. And I'm scrolling up through comments, and I'll be coming back down really quick. I noticed somebody saying something about being careful with the nuts. I'm going to get to that in just a minute here. Da-da-da. Catfish like crappie too. Yeah, catfish eat everything. Crappie is really good. I've eaten quite a bit. Farm animals makes less sense for older folks. Getting started with farm animals, it makes less sense if you're older. It takes a bit of energy to keep up with a large, intensive operation with lots of animals. For the humans, well, they were smart enough not to leave the forest, right? All right. And Paul says, I'd like to do ancestry research one day. If you tell John who your grandfather is, he might be able to look it up already. All right. Cliffside Permaculture has hazelnuts getting established, hoping soon. Yeah, the ones that Mark is producing should be up and going within 2 years instead of 3 years, because they were selective breeding for rapid maturation, and that's where you got yours. It's from Mark Shepard. Ta-da. Yeah, you got paper shell and native, small native pecans, and then the really thin shell pecans. Larry is talking about getting his nukes out and cleaning them up and getting some captured hives going again. Yep. Of course, he keeps on losing them every time a tornado blows through. They take off. All right. So if you're growing alfalfa, clover, and buckwheat, you can always put in those beehives and have potentially another yield. But since we're talking about integrating systems, let's take a minute and see how everything ties together. Selection of what trees you want to grow are going to have an effect on the animals you may use, if any. Acorns that you would get from oak trees, and there are some oak trees that produce really good quality acorns that don't take a lot of processing to be good to eat for us, but they're acceptable feed for pigs. And goats can have some, just don't let your goats overindulge in acorns. So the planting that you would do if you're going to be running goats would be to the point where you're not going to have more than, say, one oak tree in an area where goats are going to be grazing at a time. So spread the oaks out. You can have the oaks, just don't make them tightly packed. Cattle and sheep need to be kept away from acorn mast. Aside from that, we're going to be looking at the concept of stacking layers and functions, but this time instead of stacking layers in a forest and functions through time, we're going to stack animals. Because it turns out that animals have different feeding habits. Isn't this cool? Goats like to browse, so they'll come through, and granted, yeah, you leave them in the same spot for long enough, they'll eat everything down to the nubs. But their preference is to take 2 or 3 inches here, 2 or 3 inches here, 2 or 3 inches here, and they'll move along until they've taken 2 or 3 inches off of everything. And then if they're still hungry, they'll come back and make another pass. But that's their habit. They're going to I'm going to take a little bit here, 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 and keep on moving. 2 to 3 inches, if you wanted to calculate that in terms of grass forage, is 600 pounds per acre or 72 square feet per pound. So if you're going to be thinking about, I'm going to calculate this so the goats only stay long enough to take that top 2 or 3 inches and then they move, think in terms of 72 square feet per pound of feed. So beyond that, they're going to keep on eating. But if you wanted to keep it at just minimal browsing, 72 square feet per pound, and then you move your goats. Let a couple of weeks go by after the goats have been on a piece of property. You've caused a little bit of disruption, a little bit of browsing, a little bit of pruning. Do you guys watch the video about pruning? What does pruning do? Stimulates growth, right? Hey, a couple of weeks go by after the goats have been here. They've manured on the ground. So there's fresh manure. They peed, urea. Bacteria are working on that, turning it into available nitrogen for plants. Yay. And the plants have been minorly disrupted, not majorly disrupted, just minorly disrupted by having a little bit of grazing action on them. A little bit of grazing action stimulates growth. Well, who would like that growth? How about your sheep? We'll bring your sheep on next. After a couple of weeks after the goats have been here, sheep come on. Now, sheep are going to graze down to an inch or 2 off the ground. So you got maybe 10 inches of fodder now if the first couple of inches have been taken off. 10 inches of fodder that the sheep can get, well, that's 2,000 pounds. You can have more sheep in this way than goats because the sheep can eat more of the fodder that's available. So a few goats for just pruning. And if you think about the goats in that way, the goats are there to prune, right? They're not there to graze everything down to the nub. They're there to do some light pruning to stimulate growth. And then the sheep are going to come along and they're going to eat more of that. And the sheep are going to be providing me with milk and meat and wool. So have more sheep. Once the sheep are done, but not to the point of killing off your perennial fodder, mind you, always make sure you leave at least 2 leaves at the bottom of your alfalfa and it will grow back. After the sheep are done, wait a couple more weeks, and it's time to bring in the poultry. Hey, it's been a month now since the goats were there. 2 weeks since the sheep are on. I'll bet there's going to be a lot of insect activity about this point in time. Bring the chickens on. The chickens are going to go nuts, and they're going to scratch, and they're going to break up the clumps of dung that may be there into finer and finer particles. They're going to till the top couple of inches, not till, but scratch the top couple of inches. Do a little bit more disruption. They're going to leave some manure. By the time the chickens are done eating your bugs, you're going to have some pretty rich soil left behind. So by managing stocking numbers, don't stock too many. Raising your livestock in succession. The space between your trees is kept healthy. The livestock is kept healthy. Yields are going to reflect your wise land management practices. And a good rule of thumb is to not think about the potential yield, but think about what work the animals are doing for you. Because if you didn't have goats going out there and pruning your trees, you were going to have to go. What did you do with my shears, Katie? You were going to have to go out there with your shears and do the pruning yourself. If you didn't have the sheep going out there and laying down manure, you were going to have to go out there and fertilize yourself. If you didn't have the chickens coming through and eating the bugs, you were going to have to find some way of dealing with the bugs yourself. So the animals are doing actual work for you. If they happen to produce a yield too, hey, that's a bonus. So think in terms of the animals are workers doing work on the farm instead of the animals are the product and I'm going to get a yield from them. Because the minute you start thinking of the yield that you get from the animals, you start falling into that trap of wanting more and more animals, and then you wind up with more animals that you can really, then the land can really benefit from having, and you get an imbalanced system. So there you go. As long as the numbers and time on each plot remain in line, going to be in good shape. The aggregate will be greatly abundant. And let me get back over here to comments. What did I miss, guys? Did I miss something? Goats plus sheep make a good lawnmower? Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Oh, lots of comments. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Looking at Paul's forehead, Paul, as Conrad Holmes says, looking at his forehead, I'm gonna say, yeah, he's probably related because her cousin Wesley has that exact same forehead. I mean, you guys could be clones. It's crazy. Oh, Chris, I know what you're saying. I want bees bad too, but you know, the neighbor's going to have some here pretty soon again. Yeah, rewarding, but challenging as well. Let's see here. Yeah. Sassafras Brad is talking about neighbors having beehives. That's my neighbor across the street, Larry. He usually keeps bees, and whenever he has bees, he'll bring honey over to us because our flowers feed his bees. And yeah, you got lots of problems with bees. I'm going to be getting more into how to keep bees alive and ways of doing that, ways to discourage mites, ways of making sure your bees stay healthy. I've already started some of that research, but eventually I'm going to actually have to get a hive and start physically doing it, so I'll know what I'm talking about. Let me see here. Ta-da. Joe Serrano says, would you believe if I say the Serrano peppers are too hot? My maternal grandson only ate the stuffed poblano peppers, ancho chilies. That's poblano peppers are ancho chilies. Uh, Grandma had to devein and de-seed them. I'm not a fan of Serranos myself because they're just hot. They're just hot and they taste green. I want a pepper that has some flavor to it. Hot's fine. I don't mind spicy, but I want some flavor. That's why I have cayenne peppers, which are also hot. Very, very hot, but they have flavor. Let's see. One good sized serrano, 2 medium sized tomatoes, clove of garlic, and a teaspoon of rock salt. Never heard that goat formula. Where did I get that information? Which goat formula? There was a goat formula? Or the grazing habits? Let's see here. Chickens eat everything, including the worms. Yeah, oh, they'll eat some worms too, unfortunately. Limes, fresh cheese, and cream and everything. Hey, there's Stone Date Farmer. He's up there in the in the hilly West Coast area with a really nice looking hillside. Heavy clay, lots of recently manufactured in situ soil that he's working with. It looks like it'd be fun to turn that into something special. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Let's see. Workshop Project says, with me as your neighbor, I've got a fix for livestock. I'll be pushing my huge barbecue closer to your fence every day. Forehead has its own zip code. Hey, yeah, it's yeah, it's a Conrad thing. Chicken Johnny just uploaded a video where he cautions you when you cayenne peppers. He had a lot of cayenne peppers. I thought I had a bunch. He's got more cayenne pepper than I did. I only had 6 pounds. He's probably got a good 12, maybe 18. He got a lot of peppers. Don't rub your eyes. Don't rub your eyes. And if you need to go to the bathroom, wash your hands, and then wash your hands again, because it's not a fun experience to be crushing cayenne pepper and then forget before you go answer nature's call. Cayennes are tasty, but ouch. Okay, Stone Date Farmer said, just got your contours mapped out. Oh, awesome. Awesome. So now you can put together your plan for how you're gonna establish your catchments, trap that water, get it to infiltrate. Because you have to have, and this is the way it works. You got your slope, and once you've got your water stopped, now you've got water that's going to stay on the site. With water on the site, you can develop growing plants, organic matter. Organic matter increases biodiversity of life in the soil. Biodiversity of life in the soil increases the amount of plants you can grow. More plants, more organic matter, more water retention in the soil, more biodiversity, and you keep on feeding that back until you've got a really nicely developed system. It doesn't happen overnight, but once you make those first couple of steps to being able to capture and retain water and have it, then the magic starts happening. Sassafras Red says we have a cayenne plant that we've been growing for 3 years, produces fruit all year, is putting on fruit during the snowstorm last week. Yeah, so if you keep them indoors, or if you live far enough south that they never die back in the winter, pepper plants are perennials. Yep. All right, I'm gonna go take a look at the regular. I think we're caught up on chat now. It's kind of cool. So right now I've got some peppers. Let's see. Robert saying, too funny. I just shot video of your live stream earlier and me about to eat supper with a bunch of cayenne on a plate. Just waiting. Yeah, I love my peppers. So I've got right now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 6 bell peppers and 4. Cat got to 1. I've got 3 cayenne peppers growing indoors right now. So I've got 3 cayennes and 6 bell peppers. Of those 6, one of them is a little bit sickly, but I think it's pulling through. So you kept it in the pot during the winter? Yeah. I'm using artificial light here. I do have a southern window where I'm growing some stuff at the moment, but it's sweet potato vines. Oh, that's coming out on Friday. I've got a video about propagating sweet potatoes through cuttings. In addition to growing the slips, you can always take your slips, put them in some soil, not potting mix, soil, so they can really start growing, and then just clip the vines, peel off the leaves, throw them in a glass of water, let them start rooting. Oh, another one. Put it in the soil, let it grow a vine, take some cuttings. Just keep on doing that until you've got as many potatoes as you want. So there's no fear in starting your sweet potatoes early, because you can always just keep on taking cuttings. Keep taking cuttings until you've got as many as you want. That's funny. Workshop Project said, ran to the kitchen to get dinner. My wife said, boy, you must be hungry. And I said, no. Thanks. That makes me feel special. But hey, we're past an hour and a half. Is anybody growing Molokai sweet potatoes? I'm not. I'm growing Beauregard. I've seen a lot of really nice looking sweet potatoes I'd love to try. I'm working with these ones for right now. The chiltepin is, it's a little tiny, I think they call them bird's beak. I got one from I've got them back there with my other seeds. I got one from John at Will It Grow. He sent me some. Workshop Project is asking about sweet potatoes and yams. Someone explain. Okay, yeah, I'll tell you all about it. Okay, sweet potatoes are Ipomea. Ipomea batatas is the proper name for them. And yams are a different genus entirely. They're called Dioscorea. An entirely different genus of plant, entirely different growing habits. Ipomea is, of course, the family, the genus of plants that morning glories belong to. So if you ever look at a sweet potato flower and it looks, wow, an awful lot like a morning glory, that's the reason. They're related. Dioscorea are more like a regular potato in flavor than a sweet potato. They keep on labeling sweet potatoes as yams. They're not yams. Yams are Dioscorea, and sweet potatoes are Ipomea. Yams you can eat raw, incidentally. They're starchy, but you can eat them raw. Regular potatoes, regular white potatoes, russets and Idaho Reds and Yukon Golds and all of those, you've got to cook those. Incidentally, the regular potatoes that they grow up north and you can grow down here in zone 7-ish, as long as you plant them in the fall and not in the spring, because they don't really do good in the spring. Not enough cool period. Regular potatoes are solanaceous. They're members of the same family as nightshade, tomatoes, peppers, potatoes. And they also are often affected by the same pests that like those sort of things. So if you have blister beetles, they're going to go after your potatoes too. And John's going to go check his water lines to make sure that he doesn't have any more leaks. Yep, because of the trailer. Homestead Aquarius says he has Stokes and a couple of unknown Okinawa varieties. Farmer Q's got an Okinawa sweet potato that's growing pretty good for him right now. And Stoned Ape's got some Andean tubers coming. Oh, cool. Cool. Let's see how that works out. Hey, guys, it has been past an hour and a half. I know we're having fun. Glad I got to answer at least one burning question about the difference between yams, sweet potatoes, and regular potatoes. I learned the difference between yams and sweet potatoes from watching David the Good, gardening author of Compost Everything and Free Plants for Everyone, which I've managed to move out of arm's reach, so I can't just flash the book in front of you. But in any case, guys, thanks for tuning in tonight. It's been great having you here. I hope to see you next week, and of course, we'll have some more videos coming out through the week. And I will catch you next time. Good night, everybody.